York show. So we've been filming a series of shows all about senior care because many of us are at that age where we're concerned about our parents, and there's so many different programs out there that can help us to either receive the program or pay for the program. And that's what this show is all about. So I'd like our guests to introduce themselves to you. I'll start on my left.
Joseph Lawless, Concepts of Independence.
We're going to learn more about what Concepts for Independence does. And on my right,
Pinny Heller from Senior Care Medicaid Advisors.
welcome, Penny.
Thank you,
And
Angela.
welcome, Joseph.
Thank you very much.
Well, we're in for some good news today. Did you know that if you're a caregiver, you can get paid to care for your loved ones? How do you like that? So let me ask Joseph to tell you all about this program, or at least a bit about it, some of it to start.
Sure. Concepts of Independence is a consumer-directed program. We're the founders of consumer-directed and often referred to as CDPAP. It is a program that allows someone to choose who their caregiver is. Now, I understand we're speaking about senior issues today, but it also encompasses the entire disability community. So someone can choose who they wish to have take care of them, whether or not their problems are due to aging or due to trauma or any reason that they might qualify for community Medicaid. So a lot of people have begun to hear about consumer-directed as a program that allows them to hire their own family. But I always pose to everybody, there's biological family, and then there's family of choice. So if you can choose who you wish to have in your home taking care of you, it's a great place to start. And those choices can be made on language, custom, observance, or just personal choice of who you want in your home to take care of you.
Wow, this is fantastic. You mentioned community Medicaid, and for this reason I'm going to ask Penny to speak to the viewers about what community Medicaid is, and then we'll come back and learn more. I have more questions about your program.
Thank you, Angela. Well, I've been doing this now, closing in on my 13th year, and if I've heard this once, I've heard it 100 times. Families say, please help us stop the bleeding. What do they mean by that? That's because so many families have loved ones, mostly with the senior population. They have loved ones in the senior population where constantly people are going through the experience of having mom take a fall, ending up in the hospital, going for subacute rehab, getting their Medicare rehab, then going home, and having something happen all over again. And it's just constant. People are not being told valuable information that they need, explaining how all of the care needed at home could be covered by Medicaid. Families always are told incorrect information. Their family has too much income, their mother may own a home, things of that nature. And for whatever reason, they are pushed away from even searching into the possibility of qualifying for what's called community Medicaid. And I happen to be today so happy to be on the panel together with Joe because over the last 2 or 3 years, I've heard the CDPAP word mentioned over and over again. It's become all the rage. And people are hearing that they can actually utilize their own aide who's been with mom or dad for years and years, and they were worried they would have to give them up if they went to Medicaid. Now, in addition to that, we can actually tell people that their own private aide is someone they can continue with. It's a tremendous win-win for families, and this is something that is so important for people to know about.
Excellent, excellent. So tell us more about the CDPAP program. Who sponsors it? Who pays for it? How do you apply for it?
Well, in the general answer to things, it's sponsored by New York State Medicaid through now what's called Maximus and a lot of other hoops that when you go through them, you'll learn that there's lots and lots of layers to what's going on. So it's a New York State Medicaid program. Once again, non-institutional, so it's referred to as community Medicaid. That's the sponsor of it. The origin started in Goldwater Hospital on Roosevelt Island. You might want to say innovators, but they were mostly people with diagnosis of quadriplegia, spinal cord injury, muscular dystrophy, post-polio. So they had very, very limited mobility. And they understood exactly how much it cost to keep them in the institution. And then they decided, why shouldn't they have basic human rights? And so they sued the city of New York to access the money that was being used to pay for their care.
Wow.
After a while, they were given a chance to tested as a pilot program. So this 12.5 people suddenly blossomed very quickly into over 150, close to 200. And then since then, this experiment during the Koch administration has blossomed throughout the entire state. So allowing people to stay home on their terms with people that they wish to
Care for them.
have care for them and have direction over how their, well, everything. Meals are cooked, how their care is provided, how their bath is drawn, everything that we take for granted because we control our situation.
So how does someone apply for CDPAP?
It's I almost said it's simple, but it's anything but simple. But it's the same process as applying for Medicaid through a traditional agency. And once again, I'm not here to judge whether agencies are appropriate or CDPAP is the only answer. Everything has its place, and when used properly, all of these different things, all these different programs work perfectly. When someone should be in CDPAP, they find their way to CDPAP. When someone should be with an agency, lo and behold, they find a perfect agency for them, and everyone's happy. So when you apply for Medicaid, you go through the same process. You have a doctor's script that's written that then it says that you do need care, you are disabled, there is a disability that requires attention. And then there's an evaluation done by the state, conflict-free as they refer to it. And then there's the assessment by an MLTC, a managed long-term care insurance company. That then determines how many hours that you get per day or per week, and then a plan of care is drawn up. At the moment that that plan of care is drawn up, you can choose either to use an agency to staff your case with people you may or may not know. You'll grow to love them. Or you can say, I'm going to use consumer-directed because I already have people. I have people that I trust. Mom loves Matilda. And Matilda's the greatest person ever. Dad loves Matilda in the house with Mom. That, once we hear that statement, then consumer-directed is almost the only option that they can go. Now, there are a couple of caveats. Matilda has to be legal to work in the United States and cannot be on the Medicaid fraud list.
Well, that's fair.
Yeah, those are little
That
things
works.
that we do have to, and be able to pass a basic home health, Department of Health pre-employment physical. Other than that, they can work for Mom. And so, once again, what was said earlier, families come up and they already have people in place, but they realize the math is showing that they're going to lose everything that Mom received from Dad, everything that Dad prepared Mom for. Mom might lose the house that she's living in if they go down that path that they've been using.
This is actually something Pinny can speak to, because a lot
Yes.
of times people think they're going to lose their assets, but they don't. What has been your experience with that?
Well,
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that, but I just wanted to add one thing to what Joe said, and that is that so many people then specifically start the conversation by saying, if we end up losing Matilda, we would rather pay privately. When the CDPAP concept is brought up, that this is something they can utilize, the relief is so palpable in the room. And this is something so important for families to know, that New York State does allow this and does have this wonderful, amazing program for families to continue the tremendous care that they've been receiving from a personal aid, and yet still have New York State cover these services.
That's excellent. Viewers, I just can't get over this, because also sometimes there are relatives living in the home that really don't want to see a stranger come in, and they prefer to continue taking care of their loved one, whether they're on disability or they're a senior, but they do need a little bit of compensation. So, Joe, what is the compensation, and how often is a check issued? How does it work?
Compensation's based on the wages that are in New York State, heavily determined by the reimbursement by the managed long-term care insurance companies. Very comparable to what someone would receive at an agency, but at some of the CDPAPs, sometimes overtime is allowed. At my agency, we do allow overtime. Once again, a lot of things, especially when it comes to a Medicaid application or a plan of care, it's so individualized that you really need to take a look at each situation.
And your agency is nonprofit, but they're still governed by the rules of the state with respect to
We are
compensation.
very governed by the rules of the state
You're
and by
not-for-profit.
Medicaid, and we are non-for-profit.
Got
So
it.
I have all the administration and responsibility to New York State Medicaid, but none of the benefits of being a New York State employee.
What do you think? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Nope, not really.
Yeah. No, I want to return back to the comment earlier. There are a lot of families, and I see lots of them. I get calls every day from people who hear about me, and I begin to discuss their situation. I'll take calls from anybody because if it does fit, well, then we need to start down that path. But I found a lot of families were very reluctant to even look into Medicaid for the fear of losing control over the situation, not knowing who's going to be in the home, not knowing who's going to show up the next day. Agencies do what they can, but right now there's a staffing shortage.
Yes.
There is a shortage of home health care workers. There is a shortage of really good quality care. All it takes is one or two people to staff a case in a consumer-directed. And it may not be the person who works with Mrs. Jones, but Mrs. Smith is very happy with that group. And suddenly the next person, and then people find their own match. And then those matches, these people become like family.
Yes.
I attend celebrations of life. And you'll see the personal assistant mentioned by the family,
Over and
thanking
over
them
again. Over
for
and
the
over again.
years and years of extension of quality of life and keeping dad at home, keeping mom at home. And now, once again, I don't want to disparage agencies, but they assign people, the people show up, that's where they go, that's their job. When it comes to consumer-directed, there's always that little extra nuance. They find each other, and they're very responsible to each other, and it's very interactive. So that person realizes that this is the only person I work for. So it's almost this utopia of one-on-one care.
I love it. I love
And
it.
so you're looking at this, if I get sick or if my care's not done properly, I go in the hospital. You're off wage until I come out.
Oh, right.
But but they're going to, this is my only patient, so this is the person I'm going to care for to the best of my ability.
There's a lot of personal attachment there, and I like that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, and so I just want to give an anecdotal. There was a nice man in Yonkers, and his family found a man who had no background in common.
Mm-hmm.
And I had gone to the house just to introduce myself and also help with some of the translation between the family and the worker that they had found. And I was knocking on the door, and most of the time the aide will run to the door and answer the door and collect the mail and do whatever he needs to do. And then I notice I'm waiting for 3 knocks. And as a paper boy, I used to know that 2 knocks, you're not getting paid. But this man made sure, and I asked him, I said, why did it take so long? Was there a problem? He said, no. This is this man's house, and he answers the door himself.
Oh,
and I make sure
excellent.
that he takes care of his own affairs. Even though the man had severe dementia, he still went through the mail himself. He chose his own food, and the man cooked it as best they could.
I love that.
Dignity aspect is so large. And I just wanted to add, Joe, we have also the culture, religion, all this plays a role where families are so interested in keeping the person they have because of the language, the culture, religious issues. And when they're told that they can keep the person who they've been
Yes.
paying privately for and now have the government cover this.
And solved that problem of who's going to take care of
Exactly.
dads do live. But here's just a quick thing. I don't know if you guys know the secret. Not everyone in New York City was born here. And that's something, if we
Duh.
embrace it,
Duh.
The diversity.
the diversity that we have. But also, I'm from way upstate New York, and I didn't know that there was different ways to cook rice. I didn't know that you could have people claim food, I'll eat anything. But people that would say that this small island doesn't cook rice the way my island does, so it's not right.
I've heard that several times, and I wanted to
I had
share
no
with you.
idea.
I want to share with you as an Italian, there's certain ways to cook pasta, by the way.
I didn't know
but
that
on
either.
a more serious note, and I'll share that with you later, not to bore the viewers, although there's so many Italians on Staten Island, they already know there's al dente and then there's nothing else. And so sometimes we wonder what an MLTC is, as Joseph was mentioning before. And my understanding is that Medicaid, at some point a few years ago, decided that they'll deal with the financial side of someone's care, but the medical side should be dealt with by something similar to an HMO, where there's a medical overseeing of the care of the patient or the resident. And so these MLTCs, most of you are going to hear on Staten Island, there's Arch Care, and there's a bunch of other ones all around the 5 boroughs, and you'll hear these names. You'll have a nursing home ask you if they can switch you over to another one. That's what it's all about. They're just overseeing your care. And so when Joseph was talking before about the MLTC, I just thought it would be helpful to mention what that is. It took me a while to understand. What are some of the issues, Penny, that come up with respect to Medicaid and people who want at-home care? Can I call it at-home care?
Sure.
The CDPAP
CDPAP
program. We knew I was going to get that rude. The CDPAP program. Penny, how does it work with respect to Medicaid? If you're working with someone and they need a home health care person, how does it work with the paperwork in Medicaid? How does that get assigned to them?
Once someone is enrolled and once they become eligible and they receive their Medicaid approval, then they just have to notify Medicaid they want to join the CDPAP program. It's a fairly simple procedure. And once they join the CDPAP program, that's when they can enroll in a company like Joe's at Concepts of Independence, and they can begin to have their aid, their private aid, paid for by Medicaid.
How long do you think the process takes once they enroll in the program? How soon will the aid get paid? I guess that's my question.
Well, in the now MLTC world, everything starts in like a first of the month pickup. And then they contact the agency that they want to use or the organization that they want to use. They call us. And then they're able to start that process of enrolling, getting their aids in. The physical has to be done, and then the paperwork. They have to enroll into our program. But they notify their MLTC that we're the ones they want to use. The MLTC sends us the referral or the pickup, the authorization, whatever you want to call that. And then we start the process of enrolling their aides, scheduling the physicals, and then payroll starts. The next payroll after they work.
So it's pretty soon.
Yes.
So your loved ones can start getting paid pretty soon. I think this is wonderful that the government caught on to the fact that A, we have a shortage of aides out there anyway, and B, and maybe more importantly, if someone has a loved one or a neighbor or friend taking care of them already, it's kind of unfortunate to have to go to a stranger after that too.
Sure.
For this type of service.
Allow me to step back a little bit. I can even make you fall in love with our program a touch more.
Sure.
There's also a juvenile component. There's people under the age of 21 that are able to...
Special needs?
Special needs, disability, physical disability, developmental. They're able to hire their own grandparents. So you're able to
this
have
is
an infant
fantastic.
being taken care of by somebody who... That level of care that you just know that this vulnerable child is going to be taken care of the best they possibly can. So not to keep adding that we're the greatest program ever, but we are.
You are.
As far as delivery of dignity and care for that individual, the individual, we call them consumers, that person receiving care is taken care of to the best of the ability of who they choose to care for them.
Who's going to love them more than grandma?
Nobody.
Exactly. So do you find that when people are getting out of nursing homes and they have to start dealing with having care at home, do you find that this program is well received?
I have had many, many people that have been using the CDPAP program over the last 2-3 years. I don't recall getting a single complaint on it. You do get, unfortunately, like Joe mentioned, when you go through their standard agencies, they're also very good. They have a lot of qualified, wonderful aides, and the families do, for the most part, end up loving that person and becoming family. But there's no one better than someone you've already had for years that has that relationship with your parent. A lot of adult children that I know that are living out of state, and they will constantly always repeat the idea that I know who's with mom, and it's a tremendous peace of mind for me going to work, doing what I have to do, taking care of my family out of state, knowing who's there with mom in the house. There's always the issue of letting a stranger in the house. People are always worried about, what do we have to protect? What do we have to hide? Do we have to be nervous? Can we send the aide with mom's credit card to the grocery for doing things like that? And families are so much more comfortable with someone that they've been paying and taking care of their mother for years before. And now to have Medicaid able to cover that is a tremendous peace of mind. This whole process of having a parent or any loved one coming out of a hospital or rehab for the first time, and now knowing that they need total care, It is so overwhelming for families. That is the number one word on the board that is heard constantly in this industry. It is overwhelming. This is a nightmare for us. We don't know how we're going to get through it. This CDPAP program is an absolute savior.
So, Pinny, I know that you deal with community Medicaid and nursing home Medicaid. And so the difference is,
Community Medicaid and institutional, the only thing is the location of where it's received.
right.
Well, there's a big difference also.
And qualifying for it, but that's
Exactly,
that's the alchemy that
Let's
you
talk
do.
about that for a minute. That's important. We have about 5 minutes left.
Exactly.
Talk about the difference between qualifying for community Medicaid versus institutional. That's what he calls it.
Exactly.
What do you call it?
And you can call it the same thing, and I've heard people refer to it as a nursing home Medicaid.
Okay, so let's talk about nursing
that's
home
the,
Medicaid versus community Medicaid. What are the
Exactly.
differences?
It's a one-word difference. We call it the L word, look back. That's the whole difference. New York City residents are very lucky that New York City has not imposed any type of look back on the community Medicaid. So if mom and dad did have a little bit of savings that you want to protect and you're able to divest them of those savings, you can qualify the first day of the next month as it stands today. Some of the outlying counties like Nassau and Rockland and Suffolk and Westchester have a 3-month look back period. Also not that
Not terrible,
bad,
not
not terrible. But for the most part, community Medicaid has really no look back. It's the first day of the next month of after mom and dad are down to the allowable thresholds, and I don't know if we have enough time to discuss.
Take a
all
quick
the-
minute, take a
a
quick
quick
minute, please.
$14,850. $14,850.
Represents what to
The
the
magic
viewers?
number of assets, total assets, that a Medicaid recipient is allowed to have and hold in their own Social Security number. By the way, just very important to mention, that does not include any qualified plans, any IRAs. So this is outside of IRAs. Besides IRAs, IRAs are off the table from an asset calculation. All other assets,
What do you mean they're
savings-
off the table?
they're a non-countable resource.
So you mean to tell me if my mother-in-law has a $500,000 IRA, it doesn't matter, she can still qualify?
As an asset. There is something for seniors over the age of 70 and a half where the IRS mandates that they take what's called a required minimum distribution. And if your mother-in-law has that kind of an IRA, she's going to have to be taking quite a high distribution amount annually, which Medicaid does count as income. So there's two calculations on Medicaid
use that for dramatic
without
purposes,
delving
too.
too much into the details.
Right.
There's the income and there's the assets. I was speaking strictly from an asset standpoint.
Okay.
But on the income side, there are many, many very responsible pooled income trusts which would allow you to keep control of the money, spend it down, and still be able to access community Medicaid.
However,
You-
that's for
using it for-
people
yeah, using it for
lower
living
income.
expenses.
Yeah, that's for lower
Well,
income.
what Joe was
people.
referring to is a concept that has become all the rage in New York, pooled income trusts. The New York Times, as a matter of fact, wrote an article about this back about 7 years ago, and they titled it, Pooled Income Trusts, a Way to Keep Your Parent Living at Home. Because before this concept, if your income was over the threshold, which is $845, ding, 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 $845, and how many people can actually live in New York on $845?
No.
But regardless, can't fight City Hall, that's the Medicaid threshold. So if your mother's receiving even just Social Security of over $845, technically, you're over the line. And the only way to keep that difference, other than giving it to the city, is to put it into what's called a pooled income trust. And that is the only way that you can actually keep a parent at home with the home care and avoid having them being placed in a nursing home.
Wow, this is such excellent information. Is there any other important piece of Medicaid that you'd like to share about community in particular, since we're dealing with the CDPAP program, before we close? So we have another minute or so.
Well, a big one that's constantly heard in the industry is mom or dad don't qualify, they own a home. That's a big one.
And that's not true?
That's one of the bigger fallacies. There's a lot to this statement, but the threshold is $849,000. If your parent's home is under that amount, technically they can qualify if they're living at home receiving care. So that's something that people keep referring to. Oh, I don't qualify. The house, we own a home. That's not true. You do qualify. I just don't want to leave the audience thinking that it's smart to just leave the house as is, because Medicaid is always able to put a claim on an estate after a person passes away to try to recoup what they laid out.
So what do you do about that?
Well, that's a whole nother show,
But there's,
Angela.
but there's things that can be done.
There
to protect
absolutely are
it
things that
legally and
not
properly.
can be done, but should be done.
Interesting. There's so much going on now. There's so many baby boomers with parents that are of that age that they need to start dealing with the estate planning, or in particular Medicaid planning. Were there any other closing thoughts that you had about the CDPAP program?
No, I've pretty much said it all, that you are able to choose who cares for you. Access Medicaid money through the state, take care of yourself or mom, stay as independent as you choose to be. And it's just, once again, when applied properly, when appropriately used, CDPAP is a great program.
Okay, so I'm a viewer at home. I caught most of the show or some of the show. What's the first thing I have to do to get my person who's been taking care of me paid by Medicaid? Just in simple words, what's the first thing I have to do?
Start the Medicaid application process.
Okay, she's on Medicaid, but I didn't know that they pay CDPAP. So then what?
Well, then they can contact me. They can
Or-
call us. They can.
Who's us? Say the name of your company again.
Concepts of Independence.
Located?
We're located at 120 Wall Street, 9th floor. Give the number.
I'll put the number on the screen.
Okay.
Or if there's, for some reason, a different CDPAP that might be with a different MLTC, or it doesn't matter what MLTC
They
you're
can
with.
choose whatever CDPAP. Contact one of a CDPAP. You can Google CDPAP. You can go in. You can find an agency, and you can begin to inquire that if you are appropriate for that situation.
So the idea is, if you're already on Medicaid and you want your loved one or your neighbor, whoever's taking care of you, to be paid, you could call up a CDPAP, like your company, and say, I'm on Medicaid, can you help me process this paperwork so I can start getting them paid?
Absolutely.
It's that simple.
Yeah.
Once they're on Medicaid. If you're not on Medicaid, you have to call a certain type of company that deals with Medicaid applications. And
Once they're on Medicaid,
once
yes.
they're on Medicaid. Terrific. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, one big one. It's important for people, this is constantly heard. People are afraid. If I apply for Medicaid, I'm going to lose my Medicare. Mom goes to a specific doctor. I'm going to lose that doctor. Keep in mind, Medicaid is only an add-on. Medicare for seniors over the age of 65, and if you have a supplement that you've purchased for many years, AARP, Blue Cross, I don't want to advertise, you don't lose those. Medicare always will remain your primary. The hospital that she goes to, the doctor she sees, all stay the same. This is only for covering services that Medicare and the supplement do not provide, which is long-term care in the home.
Over 120 days.
That's what Medicaid is for.
This is what Medicaid is for. It's an additional insurance. It's only a benefit. There is no detriment to applying and to qualifying for Medicaid.
Excellent. Viewers, we're so blessed to have these two gentlemen, these two professionals on the show. They've educated you. They've helped us all learn a little bit more. Ta-da.